All right. So it's like, the thing about my hair is that it's just there's like one day after the haircut where I like work with it, and then after that, it's just kind of this thing. So yeah, I thought I was like on a redemption path with it, but it's definitely not happening. So, okay. So today for this reading, I'm going to talk about this step in the manifestation, like, journey. So, if you've been following along and, if you are committed to actually creating and building something, I would recommend starting from the top, of these, and they're all found in the lives sequentially, step by step, and there's some stuff that's even, like, preamble. But what we've done so what the steps are so far is about creating space, activating energy, and I'm not gonna go into detail about what that entails because 'cause it's been discussed already. And then for the 7th hub, the first step 1 is about the process of inquiry, which is, like, finding the questions and remaining receptive, and then working with um, kind of like the weather patterns that create limiting beliefs and the tool, the cross currents exercise for dealing with them as they arise. Because in this step, these stages, this is incredibly um, unstructured, which is very like I still find it really uncomfortable. And and even doing it as someone who has used this process in various ways. I've used it as discussed in the book, like advising people, but I've also used it in the creation of things that are sort of, commercially, um, you know, like, I don't know, like businesses and teams that generate hundreds of millions of dollars and, creating all sorts of things in my own life in terms of living situations and writing this big book that this is all about right now. So, this big ass thing and producing it and creating it and all that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna like kind of blow myself up. It's interesting. I mean, the one thing I'll say, and it seems like it's kind of a dig because it is a little bit, is that there's a lot of like at least in sort of my algorithm stuff about manifestation, like master classes and courses where they're where I actually think the only thing that they've like really manifested that's like that's about money is their business that's teaching people how to manifest, and then they're charging a lot of money, like thousands of dollars to do this. And so, I mean, I guess the kind of cost of following along with this is that, I'm not going to, do and this actually is very related to what we're gonna talk about today in this session, is that I am not going to, like, be marketing to you. Like, you are either gonna get this or you're not gonna get it. And this is Yeah, I mean, this is, like, really profound and potent stuff, and honestly, it's like it's so powerful. I remain reluctant about, like, really, like, actively putting it out there so that it reaches people that have kind of a relatively, like, low threshold for activation, but want a lot of power and money. Because I've had experiences, I've been teaching this and for like, decades now, and some of my experiences with it are that I have given powers to people that I wish I hadn't. I've given them access to tools that make them incredibly effective in ways and watch them abuse them and use them to almost regress, at least from my perspective, in terms of their growth and their development as human beings, and taking advantage of other people, because once again this gives access just to capacity and capability that is like like they used to say, about like what I would do is they used to call it the Jedi mind tricks, about how I was like effectively able to like shift things and navigate them at one company. Another company called it sort of the Katie magic. And I hadn't really understood what those things meant until I watched Star Wars while I was writing the book. And if you remember this, it's like that when they use the Jedi mind trick on like the, when they're trying to in their little car and they're trying to, it's like explained what the Jedi mind trick is that it only works on weak minds. And that to me is like a place of significant conflict, because the idea of being able to use really potent power to manipulate people, that like where it's a really uneven match, is something that is um where I have a tremendous amount of like conflict about. So it's like having the ability is not, it isn't like, it doesn't create nefarious, like negative actions in and of itself. It's actually the intent behind them. So for this section, so what we talked about was, as mentioned in the previous section, so the steps so far, if you followed them, is asking the question. The next is, and coupling that with receptivity to what's going to come, and not trying to filter that and edit it, being very receptive. And it's like, and I can tell you from the process I'm running right now, it's just not what you want to hear. If it was like, honestly, like in most of the time, it's just not. I mean, because if it was so self-evident and it so totally worked with your current version of kind of reality, you'd kind of be doing it. So there's like information about sort of like, it's like, okay, I'm asking this question. It's kind of inconvenient. So just being patient with that. And being receptive to it in a way that's like, okay, I may not act on this, but I'm willing to see it. And then, working with cross currents, we did that exercise. And then for the sixth hub, what we're doing is clarifying the vision. We're staying with this as more questions. So sometimes the answer to questions is a question. It's like a refinement question. It's more time spent sort of like looking at the situation at hand. And yeah, I'm really tempted to talk about what's coming up for me, because it's like really there's kind of like there's two sort of streamlines right now that I'm having to just sort of be with and reconcile, and sort of, I guess it's like more observe than explore as they're arising. And one of them is like kind of the message of what it isn't. And the other is encountering the things that I'm not willing to do. So this isn't that. So it's interesting to see the role that free will plays in this. So I'm kind of learning something as I'm doing that this time, especially in this organized fashion, where this is the first time I've ever like followed the process as it's outlined. I've done it sort of in my kind of own way, but following this and being like, it's more refined this way. And so I'm seeing more. And that is one of the things, which is the things I don't want to know about what I need to do. And then also the thing about being like, yeah, that's not something that I'm willing to do. So here's the thing, like a big part of this sixth hub is exploring, in terms of the crystallization of the vision, is also the vision about who you need to become in order to like do it. Like, so it's like what is it that what is going to be created, and like what is the kind of, to a certain extent, what's the transformation that is kind of afoot in undertaking like this process. And this is the first time I've really, in doing this, where I've really been like, before I've kind of been like, I'll do whatever, by the way. Like I've stepped over my own sort of limits and pushed myself, and even done things that I've considered to be for the greater good that are sort of against what would be my own integrity. And so now in this process, I'm a lot more like, I'm very aware of that. And now that my integrity and my authenticity, I'll call it, is so alive that anything that actually puts that at risk is like not, it's like I don't want to lose this. So it's like, and I know what the cost is to like kind of, disconnect from this. So the exercise for today is track patterns. And if you're following along in the book, it's page 294. And so understanding who you'll need to become is related to understanding who you've always been and finding what has been obscured through programming and the limiting beliefs of adaptations and holding patterns. Most of what Parinama addresses, most of the Parinama method addresses this. It's like the whole book, really. If you're feeling, or most of the part two and part one, if you're feeling called to lead but don't think you've been leading yet, think of times when you've stood up for someone, when you did the right thing, even when it was hard. Insights that land throughout this process will illuminate the person you've always been, a person whose truer nature may have been obscured by the need for survival. At first, you may feel like you're not the right person or that your dream is too big, but with some recollection, you'll be astonished by what comes up, such as grade and high school accomplishments and memories. Think of times when you felt most alive, excited, and confident. The scope of this can be wide as you please. Start with high school and remember the clubs you joined, the friends you loved, the jobs you had, the classes and teachers you liked, and even some of the trouble you got into, along with the associated bravery and risks. And why? Why did you like this stuff? And the reason, so this was something when I used to do like honestly thousands of interviews for a program, a career program, when I ran admissions for this program. One of the questions I would ask to kind of like try to like support them in accessing this type of connection to work and like accomplishment that would connect with a feeling of enlivenment and meaning was I'd ask them about high school. I asked them like what class in high school was the one that you liked the most. And to explore that, like we talk through it. Because sometimes it's like, well, I liked art class. And then it would be like, well, it's like, which seems like, oh, then do art. It's like, no, like, what was it? Sometimes it's like, it's a teacher who believed in me. It's like, well, what did they see? How did they talk to you? What did they, and it's really like, instead of just taking something at its first impression, um, and just being like, oh, that's the insight. It's like, it's continuing to mine until you hit the vein of like where there's like aliveness and where there's life. Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting things that I'm thinking there's all sorts of things that are coming up as I'm remembering examples of this. Yeah. So part of this is refinding the part of you that gets enlivened by things. So tracking patterns. So it's going back and like going, and so tracking patterns is kind of like the idea of like following the scent, if you were like in the, an animal tracker in the wilderness, it's like finding the tracks and starting to follow them until you like, find the creature of your sort of inner activation. And so, and so if you have the book, I think, this is kind of dense in terms of everything that's prompting. But this exercise, so this exercise it's really, I would have to say this is something, it's so common that this is something that people don't really have a full grasp on because of the disconnect. Because one of the things that happens and why I would choose high school is that you're kind of, in the and when I do the interviews is it's kind of like it's like right in that sort of crossover time when there's starting to be this notion that you need to be, pointing your attentions to things that are practical and that will, like, get you into college and, like, this beginning of this kind of, like, path of, like, practical outcomes, like and, like, livelihood, and making decisions to do things where it's like, well, you could take this class or, which is, like would look really good on a college transcript that happens at the same time as choir, which is something that you really love to do, and so when that stuff starts to happen and it's like making decisions and starting to be kind of even told like poo-pooed about stuff where it's like, well, I know that's fun, but you need to make sure that you get all your, trigonometry homework done kind of thing. And the importance of this is like it's really about where life lives in you and that activation and finding that again. And that's the secret. I mean, the secret is like it's kind of like what's the meaning of life? It's like it's intertwined with a feeling of aliveness. So it's like a lot, oftentimes we're searching out the action because we've been so indoctrinated that the action is what actually matters. But it's like the action that is inspired by the fuel and the inspiration and the desire and the excitement. It's like that is the quality that makes the action take on its genius. It's like that's the pull in of the fulfillment and the purpose filled work. So it's finding it because it's already in you. And the tracking patterns is the part that's like, yeah, you've had times in your life, when I graduated from high school, I remember being really like it's very similar to how I've felt um fairly recently, which is like, yeah, I don't really know kind of what comes next. And this feeling of just being like, huh, like what does that mean? And and the first time that I recaught the trail was I was in Utah, looking at the southern Utah, looking at rock formations, and I saw all the different colored layer, like, like where they have the beautiful rainbow colors of striations in the rock for and I remember it was just like it was the first time I'd felt a question arise that was just like not an like something I was trying to solve for practical reasons, where I was just like, "I wonder why that's like that." And it didn't really it was just like this thing that was kinda like, "Oh, there's some energy there." I could feel some energy of a question that was arising naturally from me. That wasn't a question I was asking as sort of a means to an end to try to accomplish something practical, to get a good grade or to, impress somebody or whatever. It was just kinda like, "That's my question. I'm interested in that." And, and I remember that feeling of just being like, "Whoa, there's questions inside of me." So and I didn't know the answer, and that was before like, long before smartphones, so there wasn't any looking and yeah. Yeah, and that's funny is, like, I don't really like, I kind of know why now, but it didn't really matter. At the time, it would've been like, "Oh, did you become a geologist?" And it's like, no, it's just more like looking at something and finding a spark of joy in it, and finding a spark of connection to being interested. Just being interested, being curious. It's like, "Oh, there it is. That exists in me still." And so the tracking patterns is about finding that and realizing that part of tracking patterns, the animal tracker is, like, you're probably gonna be, like, walking around looking for a little wh like, it's like, it could be for a little while where you're, like, looking for the first signs, but just to kinda keep looking and keep asking questions and keep, yeah, yeah, keep at it. So, let's see what we got. So, look for any patterns and pay particular attention to emotional resonance and charge. The things that energize and excite you act like a divining rod pointing you in the right direction. And so to go back to like the thing that I've discovered in my process that's kind of like a new notion is that in finding this, it's like there's in doing this process right now as it relates to thinking about, okay, like like what is my next creation? Like what am I creating next? That's probably a good question. Actually, I didn't put it that way. There's like just a whole there's a confluence of this thing, which is like the things I'm not willing to do. It's kind of like it's interesting. I'd never been really that conscious of it, of and that in and of itself being a divining rod to be like, "Yeah, I'm not that's not something that's, like, right for me in this." And then to keep asking. It's like, "Okay, like, let's try that again." Let's try that again. It's like yeah, let's try again. Um And also, like, things coming up that I'm kinda like, "Yeah, I don't love that. That's not what I thought this was. It's not what I thought this was about or this what I was expecting to come up." And the more receptive we can be to that, the better. Because it's like staying stuck is being like, "No, it's supposed to be this way. No, it's supposed to be this way." To be like, "Okay, I'm willing to see it. I don't love it. I'm gonna look at this. I'm gonna sort of, like, see what it has to show me. I'm gonna trust in it," which is easier said than done. It's hard. Okay, so that's it for now. And I guess, like, the final word on this in these 2 in the 7th and the 6th hub as we're descending is just a reminder that this stage is real like, the discomfort comes from the fact that it's, like, it's having to trust, like, and, like, release control. And for people that I work with and, talk to, it's pretty universal. I have it. I have the issue with it. I find it really challenging in a particular way, less challenging now than I used to, but still challenging. It raises angst in me. But to, like, be able to exist in this space of, like, inquiry and receptivity and, like and because the other part of it is a lot of the ascending stuff that we've dealt with or, like, worked on just comes up, like insecurities and fears and shames and this, it's like, well, who, what, that stuff. If you have that stuff, this is where it'll come up and it'll seek, and a lot of times it's gonna seek the solace of control or the solace of, like, the illusion of structure, the solace of, like, "No, this is going somewhere." And it's like, you kind of have to be like, it's like because right now the compass is, like, spinning around, and it's kinda like, the idea of being like, you're like it's like it to be comfortable, to be like, "Well, we're gonna go somewhere, but right now I'm just watching the needle spin around." And there are people around us who'll be like, "Wait, which direction are you going? Are you lost?" And it's like, "No, this is actually just part of a process," which is and actually, okay, I'll speak more to this, is that it's part of the process is, like, kind of allowing it to come in, and if we're kind of like if that makes us kind of like it attaches to any of our own kind of fears and insecurities, the tendency to be like, "Oh, it's south though, it's south." Even though it is spinning, just to sound like you're not lost and not to scare people. The problem with that is it's kinda like casting a spell. So now you have to reconcile the thing that you said that you were gonna do. It actually it creates some, like, drag. So it's like the cost um of the kind of, like, platitudes and, like, making people comfortable and that stuff, it's like taking on water, and so part of this thing is trying to stay as air as possible and just, like, let the thing spin, let people around you be uncomfortable because almost no one that you're gonna be surrounded by if you're, like a normal or, like, a person is going to have done this before, and I'll tell you that, you know, the first time and by the way, the people that are uncomfortable with you in this, like, very active, but absolutely, like, ephemeral space because it's very active. Don't discredit yourself. This to be engaged in this is very active. It's just there's no product. And people the discomfort of being able to stay in that is why, like, just most people don't have new ideas. Is that they're so wed to being like, "Look, there's a thing, there's a thing." It's like, the creation of a new thing is like allowing a new idea, a new inspiration, a new way to be shown, a new understanding of yourself that to be the person that creates that. And so, just some practical examples of this is that, I it's funny because now I'm just thinking about every single time one of the like, I've created something of, like, magnificence that there's just been there's been this kind of thing, like, I remember this first time, this person who's sort of a extended family member, got a chance to tell me what a loser I was and that I would never succeed. And, they said, "Well, I'm successful in business, so I know a loser when I see one." So and took, like, great pleasure in like, really, like, making sure I understood that I was a real piece of shit. And I knew they were wrong. I mean, so that's an advantage I had, is that, and at the time I'd given up something that was considered, like, for me, as someone who'd put myself through college, who didn't have, really any strong foundation, that I'd given up this position in a company to sort of do some exploration, where I went and did some, like, traveling and was like, "Okay, let's, like, figure out what we create next." And this is, like, 23 years ago, 20 or maybe 20 years ago. And so this person was like, "Oh, I know you're a loser." And so that's gonna exist, like, people that'll get really, like, who just, maybe, like, whatever issues they have with you, because in this case, it was just somebody that was like, "Wow, there's a chance for a vulnerability here." And this is somebody that I'm, really activate I think I very much challenge this person, um, because I won't get into that stuff, but and then the thing is that happens is that it's like, and then I went, down the road, here's just an example of this, is that down the road, like, the first company that I worked at, that I built an organization with, that was really successful, and I made a lot of money doing it. Um, like, all of a sudden, it was just like, for that particular person, it was like there was no recollection about the knowledge they had of me being such a obvious loser. All of a sudden, I was a very successful person. So it's like, I mean, I just laugh because it's like they're always gonna be there, because the thing is they're not telling you the truth about yourself. They're telling you the truth about themselves, and if it sticks to anything in you, it means that, like, there's something in you that kind of, like, is a little bit afraid of that. And so, you know, it's just a thing. It's just a part. You get part of the thing is with but, like, part of the thing about, like, actually doing, like, really sort of, like, maverick level creation is the fact that it's like the status quo is created from fear and shame and, like, low emotional capacity, and yeah, and so it's like its sort of mechanism is kind of feed that back. Doesn't know how to do anything else. So there is kind of a fortitude in this, and one of the ways that you can, like, bolster it is to actually just not disclose things to people. I mean, like, the idea is, like, you're like, you don't it's like it's choosing to spend energy, like, very judiciously, and one of the things is, like, people who are in have, like, a bad faith approach to you to begin with, and who aren't going to be able to just be like, "I'm really excited, like, that you're gonna try something, you're gonna take a risk, you're gonna be fine," or whatever, like, "Just consider this, but overall, it's great," or, like, "Is this" even constructive stuff, like, "Is this the right time?" or whatever, it's fine. But one of the things is, and this is actually, like, addressed in chapter on page 293, which is like being it's in this nascent phase. It's like um just being really mindful of who you're exposing your process to, and that they can be, you have you really can be having this like little seedling, and someone just comes and like steps on it, or like, hits it with a blowtorch, just of their own internal like angst and insecurity, and sometimes resentment. Resentment's a big one. Like the kind of like smile to your face people who are, that's resentment. There's a lot of resentment with that, and envy and jealousy. I mean, as envy and jealousy is, and it's talked about in the book in chapter 7, because it's the fourth hub, part 3. It's envy and jealousy is really about the things that we want for ourselves but don't have, or the fear of losing something that we have. So for people in our lives, they may be fearful of losing their standing relative to you. Like part of their identity is like bolstered by feeling like they're superior. So the idea that you could have achievements that outshine them is something that like, is like the fear of loss, or the envy of someone having something that you want. And so a lot of this just points to like an individual relationship with a particular like matter at hand. So yeah, so it's like it's one of the things. So it is charge. It is energetic charge. So when someone's directing it at you, and if you're in this very liminal space of like creation that's very delicate, it's pretty delicate. Like this the exoskeleton has not formed yet. So it's like exposing this stage to anyone who isn't just completely supportive is just, it's dangerous for the process, because it's like it can really, the infection of like kind of negativity can wind up interfering with this kind of beautiful thing that's like blossoming and coming into existence through you. So, and it's important, this is really important in terms of like there's two sides to this, or there's two primary facets I'll point to here, which is that this is creation, and building is about your own transformation and your own ascension. And it's also about creating things that are self-transcendent. So it's this combination of doing things that actually change you and evolve you and ascend you, and contribute in a way to the ascension of of others. So it's important. And whatever it is, even if you're like, I want to be rich, if it's like I want to be physically beautiful, or I want like it's like it's most of the time the issue with that stuff is that it's just isn't going to have enough juice, that it falls over because it's not addressing like a real, like the deeper energetic vein of where you can really like catch a lot of like like what we're talking about here in the past, like a lot of like this sort of deeper, enduring kind of sense of satisfaction. And also it's not enduring because a lot of times like the pursuit of things like, like a hot body and like wealth in the service of like sort of affluence and status is actually built around sort of bad feelings about yourself not being enough as you are. So those will fall over too, because it's like for reasons I think that I hope are obvious, but then the problem with that is that it's like the mechanism of like sort of fearfulness and shamefulness will consume that and transmute that into like this evidence of your inability to blah blah blah. It's like bad but, it's like, I've got bad, you know, willpower, or I've got bad this and I've got bad that. Um, so it's like, so that's another thing. It's like, if you can't really, like, connect with love to it, it's not sustainable. And that's like, and that's a whole that's a whole s that's a whole discussion. That's a whole discussion. So, okay, so that's it for today, and I really appreciate you, and thank you for coming along if you've made it this far, and the next is the 5th hub. Yeah. Yeah, okay, I'm done talking for right now. So, anyway, see you next time, and I appreciate you. Bye for now.